what are microactivities? They are short in-class exercise, and they're designed to stimulate student engagement. So the challenge, like Tamir was saying in the beginning of the presentation, is how we can engage students today, and especially those in a urban university like we have here in Atlanta and Georgia State University. Most of them work, they come to class sometimes tired, and we have to make the class an exciting environment. So it's an attempt to ease students into active learning mode and make the classroom more dynamic. So if we can break down the class in some micro activities, you're going to see a difference in the way that students behave. There are a lot of literature support on microactivities, but I'm not going to be talking about this because I wanted to make it more practical. But if you look at the flipped teaching and metacognition, that's where you're going to find support for the use of microactivities in the classroom. So break up the monotony of lectures. It is important to break the class material because attention spans are short. Around 15 minutes. Actually, there's controversy about the time. Some students can start getting bored and lose attention after 1 minute to you lecturing. But average, this is like a rule of thumb. You know, after 15 minutes, if you start the class and you're lecturing, that's then students start to sidetrack and going to do other things. Microactivities, this is support on the literature. They can balance class participation. Sometimes you have shy students and they will never participate, or rarely they will participate in your face-to-face class. Encourage students to do most of the talking during those activities, and they can be used in different group configurations. It can be used individually, in pairs, in group, also in large class. So for instance, this semester I'm teaching a large section with 150 students, and it was possible also to use microactivities. It's more challenging, but it's possible to do some of them. And I'll show you especially the ones that we can use technology. Okay, so when you're going to plan your class to include microactivities, ask yourself, what do you want the students to get most out of a section? You know, we plan our semester with our syllabus, and each class has learning objectives. And we have to plan beforehand what kind of microactivity will fit better that topic from a specific question. How will the activity contribute to the overall goal of the lection? One thing that I've learned is to discuss current events. When we put things that are happening in the world, the students get more engaged and more interested. So making connections with real world events will engage students and make them feel like they're learning truly relevant information. Also, make use of technology when it's possible. We have today available many different free apps, and you know, this will make students engage in the classroom. And now we're talking one that is very interesting. It is free, and you can use on the class to substitute the traditional clickers. Make it simple. Sometimes all you need is a blank paper and a pencil, and use creativity and your imagination to create or to propose a microactivity. Make it fun. When your students are having a great time and you know they are learning, they are laughing, and everyone wins. So the key question here is, what are you as an instruction is passionate about? You can incorporate things that you like better as you experience during the time, or if you're starting teaching now, you as a student or a former student, what kind of activities that you experience that you like it, and you can also adapt to your class. The goals in using microactivities are mainly to engage students, to engage students in the class environment, to reinforce the class content and concepts, and to make the classroom environment more dynamic. So the key use, my experience, is mainly to engage students and to bring, you know, a more dynamic environment to the classroom. At the same time, it's possible to reinforce content and concepts and see if the students are understanding, if they are getting what you're presenting in every class, every lecture. The next thing, what I do, I usually spend about 10, 15 to 20 minutes lecturing before I engage in any microactivity. So I start my class, for instance, at 2 p.m. I present the objective of that class. I start lecturing, and then I do a break, and I incorporate a microactivities. Because I have found that microactivities are a good way for you to transition from the traditional letters in a more interactive, subjective participation from the side of the students. Actually, I have a question for you here. That is, how many activities, for instance, if you have a class of 60 minutes, do you think you should use in a class? Or the majority of you said more than 70% already use short-term exercises. So how many do you usually use per class? And we have the answer from Rebecca. Okay, 2. That's interesting. Okay, so when I have a class that is about 60 minutes, I try using more than one. I thought I end up using almost the whole time of the class with the microactivities, so I tend to use a single microactivity in my class. But it depends on the objective and the way, you know, everyone has a way of teaching and what you feel comfortable of doing. But in my experience, one microactivity was enough to do it, to present. So the use of microactivities, there are short in class. Okay, hold on, let me go here. Mainly, whatever, you know, today the students, we talk about the Generation Z and the millennials in our class, and we can use both technological and non-technological creativity to develop microactivities. The challenge is you to use your creativity and design microactivity which will fit the class topics. Experiment and see what works best, okay? But if you can use their smartphone, for instance, to engage in microactivity, this is a plus. You see the response is going to be much better. So from now on, I will be talking about some of the experience that I've used in the last 2 years, and they've been working in my classes. The first one is the Mentimeter activity. Mentimeter is a free app, and it works like a virtual clicker, but it's more than a clicker, actually. This activity will engage students in a way that, you know, they have the electronics, and you invite them in the class to be using instead of telling them not to be connected with their appliances, with their electronics. You can use multiple choice questions, true, false, right words, or answer question. It's very interesting. I use the free version of this, and the objective that I apply the Mentimeter activity in class, students will be able to recall key characteristics of an IB concept, international business concept. This will help them to realize what word best define a concept. So here's the website for the Mentimeter. They have, you can pay to have more access, more features, but I use the free one, and it's been working just great. And it's very simple, very friendly use. What you can have, for instance, one of the activities when I'm teaching globalization, I start the microactivity asking them to write 3 words that best describe globalization. They will see a code. They go to menti.com on the smartphones. They put that code. The code will generate automatically, and they write the keywords, and you'll see a word cloud. And it's very interesting because it's been formed in front of them, and they, you know, it wows them the first time that they use it, they see it. Also, you know, beside of the word cloud, you can also put ranking. This was a case study that I was discussing, and I asked one of the questions for them to rank, for instance, the role of the activists against globalization. The first one that was ranking this activity was ignoring human rights. And when you have the answers of the students, you stop a little bit and you go and you're going to elaborate and discuss and hear the opinion why they think that ignore human rights or results in domestic job losses, etc. Why do they think that globalization can cause this? And you elaborate and reinforce what is the topic that you're teaching. So this is the first one, that is the Mentimeter activity. The other one that I use is what's in a word, the team t-shirt activity. This is very simple one. It's mainly about the American culture. You know, Americans, they use the team USA, team anything in t-shirts. So it's very common for people to use t-shirts with things that they believe, etc. So what I do, I ask students to group in teams. They will choose an IB topic. Can be used like to review some topic. And then they're going to write words or phrase in the t-shirt that best describe the topic that I want them to discuss, or whatever topic that they pick it up. And then they present in the class as a group. The students will be able to recall the key characteristics of an IB concept, and this will help them to realize what words best define a concept. So here, how it works, I print a blank paper, blank t-shirt, and then I give some pencils to them, colorful, and they're going to create their shirt. This one was about regional integration. And I want them to choose any of the level of regional integration. This one was Team Free Trade Area. And they have to write words that will represent the Team Free Trade Area. And they like it. It's very interesting. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes for that. The other activity is called How to Train a Foreign. So those activities that I'm presenting now, I benchmark, I created them, and I've been using for 2 years now, and they've been working. So at least in my experience, they've been working good. How to train a foreign. This one is about culture. So students will draw pictures that represent a concept. For instance, culture. I give them a large paper and pencil, and they will have, in a group of 3 to 5 students, they will present the post and the concept in class. But they have to be creative and illustrate instead of writing phrase or words. To show you one, this is key impressions of US culture upon first meeting. The challenge was they are going to receive a group of foreigners for the first time to the US, and they will have to train those foreigners that are coming for the first time to the US to avoid cultural risks. What would be the key topics that they will have to make people aware about American culture? You know, the first one was personal space, but today with the COVID-19, this is going to change. And I think in every culture, people will be maintaining personal space. But they mentioned punctuality, they mentioned competitive environment, and so on. And it's funny because you see a lot of creativity in the students, and they enjoying doing these activities. This one is, Twitter-like statements. This one is very interesting also because you can use Mentimeter to the response that they're going to make about a Twitter that you present in class. So students will write short statements based on Twitter that I present to them. This is an individual activity. Students will be able to make judgment based on criteria, context, and standards learned in the classroom. I chose 2 examples here from Donald Trump. The first one was from 2018, and this other one is more recent. So look at this statement from the president of the US. I make clear this is not about a political issue, it's about more the content and how it impacts international business. When a country, USA, is losing many billions of dollars on trade with virtually every country it does business with, trade wars are good. So it's about trade wars. And then I asked the students to reply to that Twitter. If they were to reply to President Trump, how would they do it? So that's the challenge. And for that, I use Mentimeter. I use the option to open-end questions, and you can use bubbles, one answer per time. But the one that works better is this one that is dynamic and will be passing the response in the classroom. They like it, this activity, because also you use technology and you relate it to the real world and how it impacts what you're teaching in the class. They usually like this one. This one is fun. Also, I have received good feedback. It's called Pop Culture. So I show short videos with fun content that I can relate to the topic of the class and provoke discussion to a specific IB topic. So students will identify concepts from short video clips and related them to IB business. So here how it works. For instance, the one that I've been working with is The Simpsons. I show about 5 minutes of the episode, Blame It on Lisa. The Simpson family goes to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So Rio is portrayed as having a lot of crimes, kidnappings, slums, and rat infestation with the inclusion of cliches and stereotypes that are not related to Brazil. So I'm showing also, I'm reinforcing this case to avoid stereotyping and educate yourself to try to be a global citizen and not come to a country with that. So this is something that brought me some concern to use in the classroom, or even when you're teaching online, a video that is copyright. But you know, there's the fair use. You can use material that is copyright unless you know, if they fall in the category that is for nonprofit, educational purpose, is a small part of it, and it's not a continuous use. So it's okay. And this, from The Simpsons, the students like it a lot. They laugh, and then they see the reason why I'm putting that. You know, it's there's many possibilities. You can actually use a part of a film, a Hollywood movie or foreign movie. I have used car wash operation from Netflix a little bit to show them also about corruption in Brazil and so on. The last one that I want to talk about is food from around the world. This is what I do also, is to bring some samples of food. Since I'm Brazilian, I usually bring things from Brazil. And I educate students in cross-cultural culinary and show the difference and create perspective and understanding and respect through the hour. You know, if you're going to be international business, you travel abroad, and you're going to experience food from other countries, you have to be brave and open to it. And that's a good way. They also enjoy it. This also can be used to illustrate comparative advantage, resources in abundance, for instance, can explain certain food preferences. And here what I usually bring, I bring the Coca-Cola Café Espresso from Brazil, that is with coffee, Coca-Cola. It's like an energetic drink. And I also bring this candy with cashew nuts that is very traditional from Brazil, and they are safe. And I cannot bring to give to all the students, but I ask some questions, and the ones that raise their hands first and they answer correct, I give as a gift, and they make them excited, and they learn also about different culture. So those are the activities mainly that I kind of created and that I've been using. I have another question for you. So after how many minutes do you think you should devote it for an activity like this in the classroom? If you have a 60-minute class, how long it should be to be considered a micro activity? Do you think 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20? Let's hear from you. Let's see. So when Rebecca has the pool, we keep going on, and we almost finish, and I would like to hear from you if you have any questions or any insights, any suggestions on how you do it. Okay, 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. That's what usually what I use in my classes. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes because I want to keep showing them the content that is meant for that day. Of course, besides of that, you can find many traditional micro activities. For instance, you can use think, pair, share. You know, you post a question, You ask the student to think individually about that question, and then after they answer, they're going to discuss with the pair student, and then they come up with a final answer and they present to the other ones. Another one is what, so what, now what? You ask a student to describe an experience. If they have a travel abroad, for instance, if they haven't done any business with people from other country, when they go to an international restaurant, are they brave to experience different foods? And how it is significant with the context of the class. Index card takeaways. This one you can do at the end of, close to the end of the section on the class. You ask participants to reflect on what they learned that day and how they plan to act on that learning. The muddiest point, this is also interesting. This microactivity, you ask students to write down what they found most confusing in their reading or lecture or activity that you ask them to do it. And there are many, many others. You know, there's a lot of resources to use. I'm going to show some of them soon to you. But you can ask, do you grade microactivities? Okay, so sometimes I do, other times I don't. My main objective is to try to engage students in the classroom environment. But when I in the section with 45 students, I usually grade. I put the microactivities as part of the class participation grade. It's usually 10% of the final grade. Okay, so, and I usually try to use individual activities and not group activities. I have used as a bonus points when it's group activities to curve grades. You know, at the end of the semester, students will be asking you to curve the grades so they can get an A plus, etc. So sometimes I use as a bonus point. I do not grade sometimes. I use them to take attendance because, for instance, with the big a poster that I want them to do the training, a foreign activity, I ask them to put the name, and that's the attendance for that day of the class. But the main objective in my case is to engage students and make it more dynamic, the classroom environment. That's the main questions. What are the key takeaways from the micro activities? You know, I have seen that it's breaking up classes is good for both students and instructors. You don't have to lecture all the time. You can brief a little bit and be more dynamic and kind of flip the class and put the students to participate more. Through the inclusion of micro activities, the students' interest increased dramatically. You're going to see that if you never use it, you have to try it. Students gain deeper recollection of the IB concepts presented in these activities. I have noticed that in the exams or when I have the quizzes. And if I use one topic in a microactivity, usually in the quiz, the students will answer correct, the majority of them. And why not try microactivity or two in your class to avoid exceeding the 15-minute attention span limit? You know, even though this is controversial about how many times it takes for the students to start to losing attention while you're lecturing, it's a good thing to do it. And use your creativity to develop new microactivities. You know, you use your creativity, and like I said, it can be very simple. You just need a blank paper, a pencil. But if you direct the student, if you give the right instruction, you're going to be surprised on their response. So I would like to share with you some of the resources that I have been using to elaborate some of my microactivity or to update them. We have the CIBER from Georgia State University. We have a pedagogy newsletter with a lot of good information that you can use to do it. And here's the link. Also, we use the International Business New Realities from Professor Cavus-Gil and colleagues as our textbook. And it has a good, interesting, you know, resources for the instructors, the Instructor Manual. I have been using some of the recommendations also in the beginning of the semester and also to try to incorporate them in my microactivities. So this is also a good resource to do it, you know, to use it, the Instructor Manual. And other resources, here at Georgia State University, we have the CETL, that has the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And I believe that every university, they have their own resources for instructors. So I always look for blogs and what is updating. And of course, the Global Edge from Michigan State University is a great source to get ideas on course contents, on videos, and things that you can use to improve the dynamics of your class. So with that, I thank you so much for your attention, and I think I'll give back to Tamir.
Thank you, Salomao. That was very good. I feel that teaching in an urban setting where we find a lot of our students actually working to be able to go to school, having one or more part-time jobs, and often they come to the classroom, tired, simply fatigued. They may have slept only a few hours the night before. So I think the student engagement through short in-class exercises, activities is, in our case, imperative. I'm wondering, when you were teaching back in Brazil, I mean, did you feel the need to do these as much, or do you feel the need to do more of these, more of the in-class engagement, in-class activities, more so in the current environment here at Georgia State in Atlanta?
Yes, that's a good point. I always ask my experience in teaching in Brazil, in the US, in the Netherlands, and students are students everywhere. They just change a little bit the culture and the language, but at the same, they are human beings and they need the environment to be dynamic. They don't want to get bored, especially this generation undergrad that we are teaching to. And but actually in the US, comparing to what I've done in Brazil and in the Netherlands, here they're more demanding. So you have a pressure to engage the students and to make the class environment a pleasurable experience. So my creativity and my imagination to propose more microactivity and incorporate them more here in the US than in Brazil, for instance.
There's a lot of good questions from the participants, and I'll bring these up. One of them actually deals with the responses from the students. Do you feel that students are participating willingly, excitedly? What has been your experience with that?
Yes, especially with the Mentimeter, when you use the electronics, the smartphones. The first one that I used this semester was with the word cloud. And when they are typing their answer in the smartphone and it appears on the screen, on the projector in the classroom, and they see the word cloud being formed, they are, oh, wow, they like it. So and then when you're going to discuss the keywords that appear in a word cloud and ask them to participate and to collaborate in forming a definition what globalization is, they're very engaged. The other one with drawing, that they have to use the creativity to draw and represent a culture, a specific culture, that was also positive. Of course, with the semester passing by, what is a novelty? They start to see, oh, are we going to do that again? So I try to skip one class. I use case study, I use a microactivity, other one I do a quiz, other things, and so on. It's always to wow them.
Mm-hmm. Again, in terms of student feedback and response to these activities, a good question one of our colleagues asks, how do you ensure that students take these activities seriously? In my own case, with some of the activities that lend itself to a feedback to the class. So the activity is done, the groups have worked on it typically in sizes of 2 or 3 students. I may ask one or more of the groups to identify a spokesperson who would then have the responsibility to report back to the rest of the class what their findings are on this problem that we were working on. So when you give the students the responsibility of reporting back to the rest of their peers, they take it more seriously. If they feel that they have to talk back to their entire class, they're going to be more engaged. Well, what do you do to make sure that students take the exercise seriously and work on it wholeheartedly?
Yes. So this semester, the day that I presented, that I used the microactivity, for instance, with the Mentimeter, was just after the death of Kobe, the basketball player in the US. And the students were very sad, the majority of them. And I asked them to post the keywords to represent globalization. And the keyword was rest in peace, Kobe. You know, and then I said, well, maybe they're not taking it seriously, but they're feeling the grief of the loss of one of their idol. And it was everywhere in the world. So I used that to make the link with the real world, that is a global thing and everybody knows that guy. But most of the times I had no problem with the Mentimeter activity, and you can engage shy students. That's a good thing, because all they have to do is to type in their smartphones. And in the group activities, for instance, the one that I asked them to draw the pictures about different cultures, they're very excited. They engage and they say, I don't know how to draw. And I circulate in the classroom and asking them if they need help, how is it going? And most of the times it's okay. Of course, you're going always to have some students that, you know, will be not too engaged, but there's nothing I think you can do. It's more of a human thing.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the questions and reflections, Salomao, deal with converting some of these in-class activities to the online setting. To what extent some of these activities lend themselves readily to online setting. I may give you a couple of minutes to think about that. Before that, though, straightforward answer. With the Mentimeter that you talked about, is there a maximum number of students when you're using the free version of the app?
No.
There's no maximum.
No.
So
the only thing about, if you don't pay, they, you know, they own whatever you use. It's not a private thing. Mm-hmm. There's this disclosure on the website. For instance, the presentation that you're going result from the answer from the students is going to be in their database or whatever, but there's no limit.
Mm-hmm. Another colleague asks about a couple of other apps, Kahoot and Quizzes. Have you used those?
No, I found out that Mentimeter is very easy. That's the one that I've, in my experience, been working fine. And the students also have been enjoying. And the advantage of Mentimeter for being free is that you can do open questions, you can do word clouds, you can use it as a clicker for false or true questions. It's very, very user-friendly and easy to do. They don't have to download any app. They just have to type and put the code. So it's very user-friendly.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to the question that a lot of people have raised, to what extent we can carry some of these in-class activities to an online setting. Of course, if you're doing synchronized teaching, this would be a good option for you. If you're doing a lot of asynchronous teaching, which we have been doing, because with this semester, we had very little time for our colleagues to make the conversion to online teaching. We essentially had about 10 days to get ready. So we opted to use the asynchronous option. But many of us are gearing up over the summer so that in the fall, we can actually, if we need to do online teaching, we can do some blended teaching, both synchronized as well as asynchronized material. But to what extent some of these techniques and exercises that you discussed, Salomao, in your opinion, lend themselves well to online teaching?
Yes, if you teach in synchronous, most of them you can use it, like you mentioned. But if it's asynchronous class, you can send the link for a short video and ask them to elaborate with the topic that you want them to do it, and give some time for them to answer the next day, or you put a due date. And also they can draw the team shirt. They can draw one image. It's possible to use most of them actually. And with the Mentimeter, you can send a code and leave it for 2 hours and give the time for them to answer. And then you have the answer for your poll, for your questions, and to comment and to ask students, like a discussion board or forum in your online class. So if you adapt, most of them I've been using mainly in face-to-face traditional classes, but I believe it's possible to do it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Another colleague asks, have you tried to do microactivities that involve college students and faculty from another country? My initial impression is that, I mean, when we're talking about short in-class exercises, that's just contained in the classroom itself. I'm trying to think whether or not this can be something that we can collaborate with students and faculty from another school, another part of the world. But I think those are kind of another category, aren't they? These virtual case problem solvings, for example, where student teams from your class and your colleague's class in country A collaborate over some period of time, interact, and come up with a solution to the case, and maybe perhaps make a presentation. That would be my answer. But what do you think about this question?
Yes. For instance, my experience when I was teaching in Holland, the students, they're very young and very creative. And one interesting thing is that we don't take attendance. So students can come to class or they cannot come to class. And I was teaching for 15 days and the students were coming. And the professor was telling, what are you doing that the students are coming? Because usually just a minority will be here because we don't take attendance. And the thing that worked is to use topics that you relate to the real world in the microactivities. Always, if you have the chance to see a current fact in the topic that you're relating to, it will work fine. I think in all cultures, this also happened in Brazil. But you're right, traditionally, what we do in class is more about, for instance, case studies, case discussions, or question and answer. You launch a question and you try to have a response from the students. But shy students, they usually would not participate. When you use those apps, you give the chance to everyone to engage and participate. And I think it will work in every culture. The only problem is that I don't know, for instance, if Mentimeter is available in every language. I know for sure that in English it is, but I don't know if it's available in other language, if you're teaching in a different setting or country or culture.
Thank you, Salomao. There's a thoughtful question from one of our colleagues. It's about balancing what you need to teach, what you need to get across in your lecture versus the time to be spent on microactivities, one or more, let's say in a 60-minute class. You know, sometimes, and this has happened to me once in a while, students have so much fun with the in-class activity that they wanna just keep going. So it may take more than the 12 minutes that you had allowed in advance. It may now be stretching to 15 or more minutes, and you feel under pressure to get back to your learning objectives and continue to lecture, obviously realizing the need to vary the total experience for the students. So you do a little bit of lecturing, you do an in-class exercise, maybe you show a little video, etc. But how do you control the timing of the activity? Do you feel that sometimes you have to intervene and cut it at some point?
Oh yes, definitely. It has happened that it was, Sometimes you get into the flow, the discussion is going very interesting, and you plan for 10, 15 minutes, and then you look, it's been 20, 25 minutes. Sometimes I leave it 5 minutes more if I see that the students are very engaged, and if it's helping the learning experience in the classroom. But with the app, you can limit the time, and you can close the pool, and then you finish, and it's done, and you keep going what you're supposed to do. And the other ones, I specify them that they have 1 minute to present, and that's it. And I keep the track of the time to cover the topics that I'm supposed to do. But, you know, this can be flexible. If you see that the time is passing by, but the discussion is improving the learning experience, and you'll be able to cover or to bring out from the students other aspect of the content for that class, I think it's worth to extend it a little bit. But as the name says, microactivities, they're supposed to be only short term. So plan initially for 10 to 15 minutes, and usually that's what happens most of the times.
And that there's a related question from another colleague. Is it best to introduce the in-class activity, microactivity, at the beginning, towards the middle, or towards the end of the lecture? In my own experience, later, middle or later. At the beginning, I like to start with a actually anecdote, a current case, current discussion in the newspapers, so that the students can relate to the topic, and then talk about it, discuss it, elaborate. And at the point when you feel like the student interest and attention is dropping a little bit, that's probably the best time to introduce your class activity. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, so sometimes I have a question after 15 minutes that I'm presenting, and I just post the question and ask anybody to volunteer to answer. And then by 30 minutes, when I feel, suppose there is a 60-minute class, I usually apply the microactivity between 20 and 30 minutes after I start lecturing. Because if I leave it too close to the end of the class, sometimes students have to go to another building, and they're running, and they don't finish, you don't have the time. So I have done it at the end, but I feel that it's better for you to do it in the middle of the class. If it's a 60-minute class, don't lecture all the time for 30 minutes, but give a question or something else for them to see it. And then 30 minutes, you apply a microactivity.
Mm-hmm. Salomao, I know you teach in classes of 45 students or so, as well as up to 150 students. So with the large classes, do you find it logistically a bit more challenging, more difficult to create the groups, student groups, to focus on in-class exercise? Does it become more challenging, more difficult with the larger classes?
Oh yes, definitely. The larger class for you to do group activities is more complicated, and you don't have the time to hear from all the groups. What I have been doing is only using, this semester I use Mentimeter in all the activities, the electronic, the app. So this way you have a quick response from everyone. It's shown on the class and everybody can see it. And then I open for 2 or 3 groups, for instance, to talk. When I see there is something very interesting that it was presented, I ask them to elaborate more. But the app, the Mentimeter, has helped me a lot with the activities. But definitely the smaller class with 45 students, I can do much more. I can interact more with all the groups. And in the large class with 150 students, what worked for me this semester was the app, the Mentimeter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we just have a few minutes here. You may want to offer some final comments, and then we will wrap it up here.
Yes, well, first of all, I want to thank for the opportunity to share my experience. And what I found out is that you have to be very creative and innovate, and every semester come up with new activities so that you can have a card of activities that you can use. Plan beforehand. When you have your syllabus, you have your topics for every week. See which activity better fits it, It can, you can find microactivity for all topics, and you can use in international marketing, international human resources, international business, anything you can use it, microactivities. The key is to be creative, and most of all is to relate to current events.
Very good points. I like to emphasize the importance of experimentation. I think we all need to experiment and see what works well in our own case with the particular type of students that you're working with, undergraduate, graduate, evening classes, day classes. And there's a lot to be said about learning from your own experience and refining. And secondly, go on to resources, some of which you have shared with us. Learn from other colleagues, other master teachers, and try to see if you can adapt them in your own classroom. So with that, Salomao, I'd like to thank you so much for a very interesting discussion. It's been very helpful to us. We look forward to participation of all of our participants today. We have people from all over the world, all the way from Japan to UK to Africa and other places. We enjoy your being here, and you have a good rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.